Have you ever wondered why maintaining your tank weekly is important? I'm going to break down the easy steps on maintaining your aquarium, especially if you have hyper growth like I do in my tanks. There are a couple of rules though that you will not have to do if you have a low maintenance tank. We'll break down each and every one from high maintenance to low maintenance tank and why when you have a high maintenance tank it is hyper important to maintain it weekly, or if you have a low maintenance tank and what are the benefits of that. That's what you'll find out in this video today, is how I maintain my high maintenance tanks and my low maintenance tanks. All right, so let's talk about low maintenance aquariums. This setup right here, and if you haven't seen this build video, you'll see it right here. This was intentionally built to be a low maintenance aquarium where I don't have to do a lot of trimming or pretty much anything because I have two high maintenance tanks, which we'll cover next. This aquarium, and the thought of this aquarium was to have specifically epiphytes, which grow at a slower rate, an extremely slow rate. I have no CO2 on this tank, and also I don't fertilize as much. I fertilize probably about once every 2 weeks. I'll do a half pump of the APT from 2 Hour Aquarius, APT2, in this aquarium. I also have floating plants to take up a lot of the nutrients. When I do the glass scraping I was gonna say do, but I always laugh at myself when I say that. I do glass scraping on this in cleaning once a month. I just did it 2 days ago. And basically, again, what I make sure is I go through and I scrape the glass. After I've done that, I'll vacuum any of the algae that was on the glass near the substrate. I don't touch the substrate in terms of disturb it. I'm just vacuuming the top of the substrate from all of the debris that's broken down. That's what I do on this aquarium. Also, they're epiphytes, so everything grows extremely slow. I do have some crypts that I just planted. Now these crypts are slow growing as well, and they are more nano-faced crypts. They are the Pervaria, I think they're called, yeah. So everything's slow growing. It takes time to grow slow aquarium plants, of course, because they're slow growing, but the whole ethos of that and thought process is low maintenance. There's no CO2, so it's not getting injected to have hyper growth, quick growth. And there are some stem plants in the back that are starting to grow. Those are the Rotala, they're Liguidias. Those are going to be starting to grow, and there's only about 4 of them. I'm going to trim them and maybe replant, but the whole thought process is low maintenance. So this tank only gets maintenance once a month. Again, water change about 20%, because this is Caridina shrimp, so I'm not going to do a heavy water change ever. None of my tanks ever get heavy water changes. So that's what I do on this aquarium here. Now over to this tank. Whenever you have a high maintenance tank, it is really important to maintain it, I would say, weekly. That's my personal experience. So take that as you may. As you can see, this hasn't been touched for over a month and it's just completely filled. I'm going to be doing maintenance on this, and I'm going to walk you through that with some clips right now and what I do. And what you should do on a weekly basis, which I haven't done, on this tank, I was gonna say do again. What I do on this tank is weekly maintenance, and I'm not currently doing it on this tank because I don't have the time. And you can see what happens if you let this thing grow out. Everything just grows. You can even see the top. All the floating plants are just taking over the top, and I need to get those out as well. But basically what I do for this tank here, I guess we'll start here. This tank right here is, let me get situated. This tank gets weekly maintenance, and what I'm doing every week is I'm cleaning the glass. And what I'm doing when I'm cleaning the glass, I'm using my brush. Well, I guess it's a fiber. And then I'm going through and cleaning the glass, and then I glass scrape it. And then I'm vacuuming any of the waste from the bottom of the aquarium as well. And then I'm going through and doing about a 20% water change as well in this tank. This has CO2, so it has hyper rapid growth. And the other reason why we're doing water changes is because we're adding nutrients continuously into this. So I don't want my nitrates to peak too high and create an algae bloom. That will happen when you're adding nutrients and you have a high density light. If you're not maintaining a low nitrates, then you're going to have an algae breakout essentially because your plants aren't consuming enough. Unless you have a lot of floating plants like I do over here. I have some over here, but I maintain them and don't let them overgrow in my aquarium. So this one does get a weekly maintenance. It's my priority tank right now as this thing is starting to grow out. It may be a more low maintenance tank where I can let it go for a couple of months, well, a month like I did on this aquarium. But again, that's the maintenance that I'm doing weekly. That allows me to not have to do a huge, large maintenance like I'm going to be doing on this one, which is trimming plants, which we'll talk about in a second, and a lot of other things. But if you're keeping it up weekly, that means you're only probably spending about 30 minutes on this aquarium, maybe 45 minutes doing a weekly clean. So my weekly clean is going through and brushing the glass, scraping, then cleaning the substrate, and doing any trimming that I need to as well. Daily, what I'm doing is I'm just checking the life. I'm coming in here after work and making sure everything looks fine from a fish perspective. All of my shrimps are doing well. I don't see any die-offs or anything like that. So daily, you should be checking your aquarium, watching it, enjoying it, and just seeing how life is in the aquarium. And then weekly going through and doing the maintenance. Now, about every 2 months, I do go through and clean out my filters. That's just what I recommend. I'm not recommending it. That's what I do, and that's what's helped me be successful. Is about every 2 months to 3 months, in that range, I'm going through and cleaning out the filter. And if you haven't seen my filter guide, be sure to check it out. I think it's up here, the link, you'll see a link. Check that filter guide out and what I go through and do for my filter maintenance as well. All right, so let's go through and talk about what we're gonna do to maintain this well overgrown aquarium that's been grown out for about a month. Basically, what I start off doing is cleaning all of my floating plants. So we're going to get those all condensed out and start removing all of the unnecessary floating plants that I need. And if you're in the local area, I'll take these over to Kona Reef. But these are all water lettuce floating plants. I have some Sylvania too that are in here, and I try to keep the Sylvania in small areas, and my water lettuce just overgrows. So let's go through and clean all of the water lettuce out that we don't need. Now, as I'm cleaning this out, another main reason why it's super important to be cleaning weekly on a high growth aquarium is a lot of the debris or leaves that fall off start to float to the top. Now, if you're not skimming them out, you're not cleaning them in the area, they start to break down and create a bloom of nutrients because of the decaying plant matter. So you need to be hyper aware of cleaning that out if you have a hyper growth aquarium. You don't have enough plants eating that nutrients that's being created, not even just nutrients, just algae, diatom algae from breakdown of plant matter. So you need to be hyper diligent on cleaning that all out or you'll have an algae breakout. But you're seeing as I'm cleaning this, there's a bunch of floating leaves. That is mainly, this aquarium has the biggest issue because I have rabbit snails that do eat plants and they knock off a lot of the leaves. So in this aquarium, I always had to be more diligent, but since it's such a well-mature aquarium, I'm not super worried about algae, big algae breakouts in this aquarium, especially with the amount of floating plants that I have. That takes up a lot of nutrients too. But anyways, let's continue onward. All right, so too many floating plants, which is good, but definitely overgrown. Now what I'm going to go through and do is start trimming some of my plants back. Now these front plants that I have here do need to be trimmed down to the base, and then it's like the alternative Renetki. I don't remember how you pronounce the name. And then some of my Luguidia as well, super reds, and some of my Rotala super reds have been pulled up by my rabbit snails, which we have been talking about before. So those will all need to be trimmed, pushed back, and then I'll be trimming the moss as well. And you'll see a close-up of everything before I go through and start trimming. And then we'll start talking about trimming techniques as well and replanting. So right here is my moss, and right at the top here, there's some hair algae that's been growing. So I'm going to trim this whole area right here down. It'll grow back up. And there used to be a cave right down here, so I'm going to trim this all back, trim the front area of this down. Now be aware, when you have moss and you trim it, it goes everywhere. As you can see over here, which you can't see, some flew over here and I just let it regrow because it looked good, but it's a lot of vacuuming after. So once I've trimmed all of this, well, I'll clean the glass first, because what'll happen is as I'm cleaning the glass, and if this starts to waft up, then it goes everywhere and it's harder to vacuum. So I'll do the stem plants first, fix all of these, then I'll come back, clean the glass, then trim all of my moss as well. And as you take note down here, there's some yellowing on some of my Privaria. Nutrients is being lost, so we'll add some root tabs in here, taking this time to do a lot of the root tabs and re-nutrient uptake on a lot of these. But as you can see, these have all been uprooted because of my lovely rabbit snails. Never ending. Well, it has ended, but it just started back recently because after I did a big trim of them. But let's clean this all up too, so it's not demanding in the foreground of stem plants here. We'll trim them back and we'll get going on that. So let's start with our front area here, trim these all, and then we'll move towards the back. So when you're going through and trimming your stem plants, you want to trim them as low as you want them to regrow. So you just cut it, and then I like to cut off any of the non-nutrient dense stems, well, leaves. So I'll take this out and show you guys. Basically what I'll do is I'll trim these off, and then I'll start from a new node. You can see the nodes, if I can focus. You'll see the nodes here to here to here. You want to trim at the middle of a node because the node is where the new roots come from. But let's continue onward. Just look how gorgeous this is. If you see it before I take it out, you can just see how lush and red it is. All right, so now what I need to do before I start building up this area with plants, now that I've worked my way in trimming this front, I need to address these floating super reds from my rabbit snails. So let's go through and address that. All right, so basically we have our alternative right here. Liquidia secondary, and I have my super reds that will grow out in the back here. So I think they're all well organized. These will start growing back. I think I have it all figured out from where they need to go. But other than that, what we need to do is trim some of our back stem greens that I've been placing over here as well. I forget the type of them. You'll see them in the description if you want to know what these ones are in the back that grow like weeds essentially. Just put them in the comments if I don't put it up. So let's continue on. Before I trim them, let's talk about why. I want the light to be more so on our Rotala Super Reds so they grow quicker and I can get my dense forest back. So what I'll do is I'll make sure I trim this off from right here as well. So I basically just cleared the way back here for my super reds to grow more dense so more light can get to them. That's what I ended up doing right here. All right, so it's looking good. The only thing I need to do now is trim the moss, but before I do that, I'm gonna clean the glass again, because if I trim the moss and I waft, the moss is gonna go everywhere. All right, now it's time to trim this wonderful overgrown moss pit here. See if I can focus you all. Again, it just has a ton of moss and I need to trim it up. If you don't trim it up, it grows overwhelming, and then when you do trim it after it's overgrown, then it has a regrowth issue. So I'll trim here, up and around, and layer. So I'll trim it flat and in so it stays condensed in this area. Mr. Vampire Shrimp is very happy with all the macro debris. So as you can see, trimmed it up. Very nice and neat. It'll start to grow back out. So cleaning all of this up is the funnest part about this. Not really. This takes time. So I'm going to go through and clean this all up, and then we'll check back. Alrighty, so this thing's filling back up. It looks totally different now that we've trimmed it. And that's what you should be doing on a weekly basis with a high-tech tank. So this is a high maintenance, high-tech tank. Growth just excels in here, and you should probably be doing it weekly. That's what works for me. Just like this tank over here, do a weekly trimming if I need to, scrape the glass, and water change. Now on my low maintenance tanks, like this guy, only once a month. That's all I need to do is go through and scrape the glass and drain some of the water out, about 20% of the water change, and that's Caridina tank. This is a Neo-Caridina tank, and my other one is a Caridina tank as well. But to keep up with your high-tech tanks, you should be doing something weekly. Low maintenance tanks, depending on the build type, just like my epiphyte based tank, that's a low maintenance tank. There's not a lot of stem plants, so I don't have to have a huge cleaning. This one took me right around an hour and a half to clean because I didn't do anything for about a month. This only takes me about 30 minutes, and that's because I maintain it weekly. So those are my maintenance tips, and how to reduce the amount of maintenance in terms of how long it takes to maintain a tank, and do tank maintenance because of your upkeep, right? So if you have CO2 in your tank, you're going to have a lot of hyper growth. That's what I have in here with the high density light. I mean, I have a high density light in my other epiphyte tank, but that's slow growing plants that require less maintenance. So just be aware, depending on what type of tank you lay out, there may be more required maintenance if you are seeing hyper growth. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. And if you haven't checked out my build video of this tank over here, take a chance to look at the build video right here. And if you have any additional questions, again, I'm always here to help. But until next time, I'll see you all on the next video.